Here we want to find the integral of 1 divided by xy minus 5 to the 3 halves. Think of this expression as x squared minus a squared. And so we will use the suggestion of letting x equal to a sine of theta, a times secant of theta. And so first, let a squared be 5. Let a squared be 5. And so a is the square root of 5. And we will use the suggestion of let x be a times secant of theta. So x will be the square root of 5 times secant of theta. The derivative of x with respect to theta, or dx d theta, here we want the derivative of secant of theta will be secant of theta times tangent of theta. So dx will be the square root of 5 times secant of theta times tangent of theta times d theta. And now let's write the expression xy minus 5 to the 3 halves in terms of theta. X squared will be the square root of 5 times secant of theta squared. Rational exponent of 3 halves. So we have xy minus 5 to the 3 halves, which is the same as the square root of xy minus 5 to the third. So this is the same as this. So rational exponent of 3 halves is the same as the square root with the third power. The square root of 5 times secant squared is 5 secant squared. Common factor is 5, so we have 5 times secant squared of theta minus 1. From trigonometry identities, secant squared of theta minus 1 is tangent squared. The square root of 5 times tangent squared will be the square root of 5 times tangent of theta. And then we have the third power outside here. And so now the integral 1 over xy minus 5 to the 3 halves is equal to the integral of 1 over the square root of 5 times tangent of theta. Okay, that's what the xy minus 5 to the 3 halves is. Dx is the square root of 5 secant of theta tangent of theta d theta. And then we can separate this like this. So here we have the square root of 5 dividing by the square root of 5 to the third. Tangent divided by tangent to the third is tangent squared. And then we have secant 1 at the square root of 5 dividing by the square root of 5 to the third is 1/5. Secant of theta is the same as 1 over cosine. Tangent squared is sine squared over cosine squared. And this right here is the same as 1 over cosine times the reciprocal of this, which is cosine squared over sine squared. Cosine squared dividing by cosine is just sine. So we end up with 1/5 times the integral of cosine dividing by sine squared. And for this integral, we can use U substitution. So far we end up with 1/5 times this integral, and now we're going to go find this integral right here. Let U be sine of theta. Du d theta will be cosine of theta. So du is cosine of theta d theta. The integral of cosine dividing by sine squared, rewrite it as 1 over sine squared times cosine theta d theta. This will be 1 over U squared, since U is sine of theta. Cosine theta d theta is du. 1 over U squared is U to the negative 2. The antiderivative of U to the negative 2. Add 1 to the exponent. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1, and then dividing by negative 1. But U to the negative 1 is 1 over U, and then we have a negative, so that's how we get negative 1 over U. U is sine of theta. 1 over sine of theta is cosecant of theta. So this integral is negative cosecant of theta. And so we have the original integral is equal to negative 1/5 cosecant of theta. The original integral was in terms of x, so we need to write cosecant of theta in terms of x. Earlier we have x is equal to the square root of 5 times secant of theta. Divide both sides by the square root of 5. We have secant of theta is x over the square root of 5. Secant of theta, by definition, is hypotenuse over the adjacent side. This is theta, this is the opposite side, this is the adjacent side, this is the hypotenuse. This is a right triangle, so we have opposite side squared plus adjacent side squared is equal to the hypotenuse squared. In this case, the hypotenuse is x, the adjacent side is the square root of 5, and we're looking for the opposite side. The adjacent side is the square root of 5. The hypotenuse is x. Square root of 5 squared is 5. And so we get the opposite side squared is equal to x squared minus 5. take the square root of both sides, we get the opposite side to be the square root of x squared minus 5. Cosecant of theta, by definition, is the hypotenuse dividing by the opposite side. The hypotenuse is x. The opposite side is the square root of x squared minus 5. So cosecant of theta is x over the square root of x squared minus 5. And so the final answer will be 1/5, negative 1/5. Is negative 1/5 cosecant of theta, but cosecant of theta is x over the square root of x squared minus 5, and so the final answer will be negative x dividing by 5 times the square root of x squared minus 5.